from movies to video games, when did you first fall in love with video games? Literature was the first love.
I mean, no, films.
Films.
Films was always well. What I loved first as a kid was films. Older, began reading books properly aged at about 8. Was watching films long before that.
Nice.
And then probably it was always bouncing between the two, which I preferred. I think they're good at different things. Games, I played and above all watched a lot of games as a kid, as being a young kid, and other people playing them. And I obviously liked the core thing games do, which is you press a button and something happens. They're responsive, they're alive, and that's captivating. And then the competitive angle of games is fun, or, beating this, beating that, winning this. That was fun as well. Sometimes obsessively so. I remember being completely addicted at one point when I should have been studying for months at a time to Tetris on a Game Boy. I liked games and I liked interactivity and I liked the movement to this digital world that's really emerged for me pretty much as soon as I left college. But I didn't love it. And then I really fell in love with games when I was properly making them probably as late as like 2001.
Oh, wow.
And when I suddenly began to see, first of all, my mind, that's a whole nother story, but just suddenly saw what they could do and could be and what this chance was to be one of the people involved in making these things that was this, where you were really kind of breaking trail into the future, it felt like. And I think that was when I really went, these are amazing. And that's when I really fell in love with, I could see it in moments and suddenly you could make this whole experience. So that was really the moment for me.
Yeah, of course, because you were a pioneer of open world games that are so narrative driven. So it's like you didn't have too many examples.
Yeah, and before that, it was PS1 or even before that, games looked terrible. That you would be like, it's 8 pixels. It's a car. It was not a car. They just didn't, it was always, you were squinting and closing both your eyes and trying to imagine it was this thing you were told it was. And all they were about, very surreal subject matter because you couldn't make them remotely real.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we were able to build these experiences where you could run a simulation of a city and it was in 3 dimensions and it felt alive. And we were trying to give it even more, at least the illusion of even more life. And yet so you could tell a story in 3 or, using time in 4 dimensions. And that felt very inspiring.
Yeah, I think GTA 3 is probably one of the most influential games of all time. It created a feeling of an open world. What do you think it takes to create that feeling? There was like these looming skyscrapers. There was the changing traffic lights. There's the feeling like, first of all, you had a feeling you could do anything. And then the world was reacting to it in a way that didn't feel scripted.
Yes, and it wasn't scripted. It was really, really, really low rent AI. Like it was a simulation that you could prod and push and see what happened. And I think that was incredibly. It was 2 things. It was the fact that here was a simulation that you could mess about with, and the simulation seemed to have a personality. So you could push and see, and the world would push you back in whatever way that meant. And then the other thing was just this, I think that one of the reasons it was so captivating was also the idea of if I did nothing, the world still existed. Mm-hmm. Or I could act in quite a passive way. I could just listen to the radio. I could look at billboards. I could talk to pedestrians. And well, not in GTA 3, but by Vice City, you could begin rudimentary talking. And the world was there and existing. And so it was the idea of like almost something that really tried to explore in lots of games, the idea of being a digital tourist. You were in these worlds and you went there as a visitor and they existed almost independent of you. It felt like when you turned up, the world was running. It didn't feel like you'd started it. Of course, you had started it, but that feeling, I think, was one of the things, the illusions that people found very captivating. Was I'm in a world that both doesn't exist and does exist.
So there's these 2 concepts that I was reading about, just to put names on them. One is systemic video game design, so systemic games, and the other is sandbox video games. And the systemic is from the environment perspective, which means that there is these interlocking game rules and systems that interact with each other and produce emergent behavior,
Mhm.
and that emergent behavior is what creates a feeling like there's a living
Mhm.
world. And then the sandbox aspect, which is overlapping but different, is from the user perspective, from the player perspective, the feeling like you can do anything. And when those two things combine, the feeling like you could do anything and the feeling like there's a world that's full that is also doing anything it wants, creates this incredible feeling of like this world is alive
And I'm in it.
and
And
I'm
it's
in
the
it.
combination of those two things, I think, is very powerful. And I think with GTA 3, for me, it came at a really interesting time in my life personally, and I was very able to engage in it probably for the first time professionally, actually awake and do something. And we were really sort of began to scratch the surface on how do we fill these worlds with content and how do we make that content interesting and make the content all interwoven. So as you start to mess with these systems, they also feel alive and interesting.